Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. And the Week 7 waiver wire looks like garbage. I'm going to be honest with you. If you're looking for a bunch of help on the waiver wire this week, you're probably not going to get it. So hopefully your team is healthy. Hopefully you don't have a ton of buys, because if you do, you might be screwed. But even with that being said, we are going to try to find some options, not just for this week that could help you out, but I've got a couple of guys that maybe we've forgotten about that we need to start stashing now, just in case they make a fantasy impact later in the season. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners. Every waiver wire show we do, I got running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends for you. I've got streaming options at quarterback and defensive special teams, and we'll talk about some guys that maybe we need to go ahead and drop and move on from. But let's jump right into all the information. Let's talk about our running backs first. And there are going to be some guys that I'm going to throw back on here that necessarily you're not going to be able to start right away. But again, because of where we're at with the waiver wire right now, and because of where we're getting at into the season, I think it's time for us to start just picking up some handcuffs and trying to hold them. Khalil Herbert, I think, needs to be owned. A lot of people went and dropped him after David Montgomery came back. And I understand why. He's down into like the 40 and 50% owned on different platforms now. And when you dropped him, the thought process was, oh, David Montgomery's back. He's going to be the lead back. We've seen him do it so far this year. But Khalil Herbert continues to be more efficient, and he continues to break bigger plays than David Montgomery. I love David Montgomery, but there has been something just a little off with his explosiveness this year. If you watch some of the film, he's like hesitant, like he's not hitting the holes as quickly as he used to in the past. Khalil Herbert is like getting north to south, making a move, making people miss, and then breaking off. And we saw it again this past week on Thursday Night Football, where he had a huge run. So because of that, we're putting ourselves in a situation for David Montgomery owners that if something were to happen to him again, or if this is a team that continues to really focus on the run and Khalil Herbert continues to outperform David Montgomery, he might start getting more and more touches. So for Montgomery owners, I think we need to have Khalil Herbert on our roster as well. For Baltimore, Kenyon Drake is going to be one guy that obviously everyone's going to be looking at. And if you need somebody right away, maybe it is Kenyon Drake. If for some reason Dobbins, who tweaked his knee again, doesn't sound like it's anything serious, just maybe a little bit of a tweak. If they decide to set him or say, hey, we're going to make him inactive again this week, we just got to play it safe with him, I would completely understand that. 119 yards on the ground and 10 rushing attempts. Obviously, huge day while also scoring a touchdown. But Gus Edwards is off the PUP. And John Harbaugh said this past weekend, he's close to returning. We've got to go get Gus Edwards right now. If you don't already have him, you've got to go get him, especially you J.K. Dobbins owners. And honestly, I feel like everybody should be taking a shot at Gus Edwards. Should you be using like your first waiver wire priority on it? No, I don't think there's anybody that we're using our first waiver priority on this week. If you're a low-end guy, though, that, hey, if you end up losing it, it doesn't really matter anyway, absolutely. Put in a shot for Gus Edwards. Hold him until he comes back, hopefully maybe in the next couple of weeks. And if he does, maybe we see him start to get some more run with J.K. Dobbins just not getting back to his former self as quickly as we would have liked. From Atlanta, Caleb Huntley, I told everybody 2 weeks ago when Cordero Patterson went down with the injury, everybody was running to grab Tyler Algier. And if you were watching this show, you heard me bring up Caleb Huntley then. And I brought him up again. And now I'm bringing up again because he's more efficient. He's got bigger plays. And he's basically comparable in touches right now, because he got more carries this past week than what Tyler Algier did. And this was a game that was a tough matchup that Atlanta was winning, and they wanted to make sure that they stayed ahead. They were trusting Caleb Huntley with the rock. They were moving forward with Caleb Huntley. I like Caleb Huntley. I think he is a guy that could take Tyler Algier's spot and then kind of be that backup to Cordero Patterson once he comes back. But the one thing that we see with guys who get injured all the time is maybe they don't work their way back as quickly as possible. And maybe Cordero Patterson, his time, comes where he comes off now and he's ready to go again. and he's just like, I just don't have it, and maybe he's got to spend another couple of weeks inactive, Caleb Huntley could take over as the lead back during that time. Even though they're going to be in the bye next week, I think it's very important for us to talk about the LA running back situation for the Rams. Because over the weekend, all of a sudden we hear Cam Akers on the trade block, out due to personal reasons, issues with the team, potentially being cut. So many different things with Cam Akers. Not only all that, but he just hasn't played well this season, which is not surprising, given the injury he came off last year. So Malcolm Brown, obviously everyone's going to kind of be thinking of him, right? I get it. And if you need somebody right away, Malcolm Brown might be a guy, especially for you Darrell Henderson owners, to kind of grab and hold on to just in case. But my Fantrax find of the week is going to be Kyren Williams, running back out of Notre Dame, a rookie who injured himself in week 1, and now, even though he's on IR, could be back in the next couple of weeks and could make a significant impact on this team. So, Kyren Williams, for me, you would have to pick him up. You would have to stash him on your IR, and you would just have to wait. We're not using a top priority on him, and more than likely, he's going to clear waivers. I don't see anybody talking about Kyren Williams or bringing him back up. I also don't pay attention to anyone else's content, so I don't know. But I don't think a whole lot of people are talking about this Kyren Williams. And if you remember back at the beginning of the season, there was some talk that Kyren Williams could push to be kind of that third back in the mix of Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. And that because he was so good as a pass protector, he could see himself on the field on some third downs. He was a very underrated running back coming out of Notre Dame, does some things well, is not a guy that I see taking over and becoming like the back the rest of the way. People are still going to get touches, but if he becomes the lead back, with as poor as his offense has been, even if the guy is decent, he could become a running back 3 flex type of option where, again, maybe in our buys, injuries, and things like that, we can toss Kyren Williams in there for a couple of games. Don't forget about him. D'Onta Foreman in Carolina, really bringing his name up again because of all the talk about CMC. Is Christian McCaffrey going to get traded? What's going to happen with him? I have absolutely no idea. There's been a little bit of a pickup in the talk about that. And I believe it might have been Jay Glazer talked about it a little bit more this weekend. The original information came from an account that has no credibility whatsoever. So I don't know if it was just kind of a stunt for them to try and get a few more followers or whatever it was. Now it does sound like that maybe there is a little bit more traction to it as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. D'Onta Foreman for you CMC owners, I would kind of grab him for right now. Obviously, because if CMC were to go down, you're going to need his backup, and he's the clear backup right now. But if he's traded, then you get yourself 2 starting running backs. Deion Jackson, a lot of people were able to get to him, but he's still only like 30% owned on multiple platforms. And after his past week this week, for all of you out there who are, JT owners that are trying to make it through right now, Deion Jackson is the guy that might be able to help us out over the next couple of weeks, especially if for some reason JT is held out again here in week 7. And then James Cook, he's also going to be going into the bye. He's been dropped enough that he's down into about 20-30% owned as well. But a big surprise this week. Should we do my surprise face? Hold on, I'm going to say something. I'm going to give you what my surprise face would be. And let me know on a scale of 1 to 10 if I would win an Emmy or not. Zach Moss was inactive this past week for the Buffalo Bills' biggest game of the season. That's my surprise face because Zach Moss sucks. So I'm not surprised. Listen, James Cook is going to be the RB2 moving forward, and coming out of the bye, a lot of times what will happen with coaches is they'll take a look at the way players are being used, and this gives them extra time to reevaluate some things, put a new game plan in order moving forward, and James Cook could be a guy that benefits greatly throughout the rest of the season. Devin Singletary, though, still the lead back. Dude's been playing very, very well, but for James Cook, definitely a great stash for those of you that might need to just hold somebody. All right, now we've spent like 10 minutes talking about a bunch of running backs that we may not even use this year, but have to hold because fantasy football is just a cruel, cruel mistress. For wide receiver, we've got a few options here that we need to keep in mind. Dante Pettis for Chicago going up against New England this week. 7 targets last week, was second on the team, and he scored a 40-yard touchdown. Chicago's starting to throw the ball a little bit more, and it looks like Dante Pettis could be trying to work his way into a wide receiver 2 role behind Darnell Mooney, which honestly would be great for the entire team because their wide receivers suck. They need somebody to step up and be decent opposite of Darnell Mooney. Alec Pierce from Indianapolis, we've talked about him over the last couple of weeks. He was a guy that, he was essentially shut out all this past week. I have an issue with some wide receivers right now. It happens almost every single week. I say that I'm going to sit a guy. I don't feel great about it, but I'm going to have to go with it anyway. And they don't perform the entire game, and then all of a sudden at the very end of the game, they do something. And that was Alec Pierce. Did absolutely nothing the entire game. Nothing. He had like 2 catches for like 15, 20 yards or something like that. And then he catches a 32-yard touchdown. Or it's like a 40-yard touchdown with like 10 seconds left in the game. Of course it happens. Still saw 7 targets. Campbell also had a big day. He saw 11 targets. I still think Alec Pierce moving forward will end up being the second guy up, though. Traquan Smith for New Orleans. I like Traquan Smith. I always have. He's never really done anything. But Michael Thomas, he hasn't made his way back yet. Jarvis Landry was beat up. Chris Olave wasn't cleared from his concussion. If we're desperate for some wide receivers coming up this week, maybe Traquan Smith is a guy that we have to look at as a desperation ad if the other guys have to end up missing again. Wan'Dale Robinson, as far as the wide receivers go, he's probably the one that we need to spend the most fab on, the guy that we need to use the top waiver priority on. Nobody is doing anything for New York in the passing game, right? So 4 targets, 3 receptions, 37 yards, and a touchdown. First game back from his injury. Opportunity is 100% there for him. If you're going to be using some fab on him, I would say maybe 10% of your overall fab. I'm not going to go that high, maybe 5%, just because, it's a New York Giants. And yes, they're winning. And I think they're doing a tremendous job. I'm not hating on the New York Giants. I don't think Daniel Jones is going to be a guy. And these wide receivers are not going to be guys that when we get into the thick of the playoff race and the playoff hunt, or even the playoffs in general, those aren't going to be guys that are going to win football games for you. And that's a lot to ask of the defense in Saquon Barkley. So I'm just concerned about what we see from that passing game moving forward the rest of the season. Rondale Moore for Arizona. DeAndre Hopkins was on the way back. So we were going to say, okay, these other guys are going to be gone. But now Marquise Brown is gone. And the one thing about Rondale Moore that I really, really like, especially over like a Greg Dortch, is his big playmaking ability. Marquise Brown is a field stretcher. He's got the speed to go down the field. He's done a little bit of everything this year, which is good to see his role expand in an offense. DeAndre Hopkins is not that guy anymore, and he surely won't be that guy after missing the first part of the season. Rondale Moore is going to be a field stretcher, a big play guy for Kyler Murray the rest of the year until we know more about Marquise Brown. Dr. Ethan Turner saying there is a possibility it's a Liz Frank injury, and it is the same foot that he had issues with coming out of college. Josh Reynolds, he's coming out of the bye. Do not forget about him. Going up against Dallas, 80 receiving yards in the last 3 games, more than 90 in 2 of the last 3, 28 targets total in the last 3 games. Oh, and they get a Dallas team that they're probably going to have to throw it against quite a bit because Dallas is going to put up points. Detroit's defense sucks. Nico Collins for Houston, reminding everyone about him as well. He averages over 18 yards per reception right now. He has more receiving yards than Cook. And he gets a matchup coming up against Las Vegas where they're probably going to have to throw it quite a bit. Now, tight ends, it's already a sad situation. And now we find ourselves with only really 3 tight ends that we might take a shot at this week. Bobby Tunyon last week caught 10 of 12 targets for 90 yards. Finally saw a big volume game, but they were basically behind the entire time against the New York Jets. So is that what we're going to see moving forward? Can he keep it up? That's going to be big question marks. Cade Otton going up against Carolina this past week. Brate has his second concussion in a matter of weeks. Cade Otton could end up being that tight end solidified for the foreseeable future for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then Daniel Bellinger. I brought up Daniel Bellinger like 2 weeks ago. And I mentioned him that, we're not going to be starting him anytime soon. And the volume hasn't been there. but he scored a touchdown last week, and the opportunity could be there for him. So we need to potentially add him. Well, I think this is the week that we're finally going to be adding him. 5 targets, 5 receptions, only 38 yards, scored a touchdown. I think we're going to see more Daniel Bellinger as the season moves on, going up against a Jacksonville team that, again, they got absolutely destroyed this past week by Indianapolis, but they have a pretty decent pass rush still. If we're getting the ball out quickly for Daniel Jones, Daniel Bellinger could definitely be a guy that he utilizes. Let's talk about some streaming options. First off, at the quarterback position, Cooper Rush, anyone going up against Detroit, really you kind of have to play. But Dak is getting closer and closer, but will this be the week that he's back? It could be another week where we say, hey, it's Detroit, we're probably going to win this game. Let's go ahead and just sit him another week and let's let Cooper Rush take care of it. So he could end up being a great streaming option this week. Daniel Jones, just mentioned him a second ago. Jacksonville's pass rush, yes, has been decent this year, but they just got destroyed by Matt Ryan. Over 100 yards, obviously, for Michael Pittman. Over 100 for Paris Campbell. Touchdowns to the tight end and the wide receiver positions. They had a tough week. And then Bailey Zappi going up against Chicago. Mac Jones has been getting closer and closer, but Zappi having a really good week this week. Maybe they just say, hey, Mac, go ahead and just take a seat for right now until you're fully 100% healthy. We don't want to risk it with you. Let's just keep going with Bailey Zappi. Defensive special teams. New Orleans going up against Arizona. Arizona has looked awful lately. Yes, the New Orleans defense is banged up, but Thursday night games always tend to be a little bit of a mess. Anyway, Carolina going up against Tampa Bay. This one is going to be risky, but Tampa Bay did not look good this past week. Carolina is tough against the pass at times. What we're hoping for is Carolina is we're going to say, yes, they're going to give up anywhere between 24 and 30 points. But we need maybe an interception and a couple of sacks, and then they make up for it. And then for Cincinnati going up against Atlanta, Atlanta looked good last week in a tough matchup, but Cincinnati's defense, I mean, people forget about how well they are playing so far this year, and they get them at home. Absolutely, Cincinnati is going to be an option this week against Atlanta. And then some players to drop. You see Kareem Hunt's name at the very top here. We are not dropping Kareem Hunt. Let me say it one more time for those of you in the back that aren't even watching. We are not dropping Kareem Hunt. The reason that he's listed here is because he is a sit for me moving forward. Until we see big games from Kareem Hunt, I am not starting Kareem Hunt. However, if you own Kareem Hunt and you don't own Nick Chubb, try to trade him to the Nick Chubb owner and see what happens. Chase Edmonds for Miami, he's basically lost his job for the most part. Mostert didn't even practice for a majority of the week, and he still came out and led the team this past week. Elijah Moore, 0 targets. 0 targets this past week. Greg Dortch, he looked like he was having a big role. That has kind of fallen to the wayside. Rondell Moore is going to be the guy opposite of DeAndre Hopkins, and Zach Ertz is still putting up some fantastic numbers. And then Noah Brown, Gallup is starting to work his way back, and because of that, Noah Brown is starting to be a guy that's falling to the wayside again. Now that I'm losing my voice for this video, I think it's time that I go ahead and get out of here. Hopefully you all have a great rest of the week. Good luck if you are waiting on any Monday night points, and that could be the difference between a win and a loss. Good luck with that. Hopefully you get those points on Monday night. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe to the channel down below. And also leave a comment. If you're thinking about dropping a player, before you do it, leave me a comment and ask me my thoughts, and I'll try to get to as many of those as possible. I think that's worked out pretty well this year, talking about, hey, who are we dropping, who are we not dropping, and things like that. But I'm going to get out of here. All of you stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.